Hi guys, welcome back to what is now my 21-week pregnancy update. If you don't follow me already, my name is Christie and I already have about an 18-month-old daughter called Grace, and this is my second child I'm expecting with my husband Steve. We are looking forward to welcoming a baby girl towards the end of this year, beginning of next year, and we are just so excited to grow our family. If you don't subscribe to me already, then please consider doing so, because I put out new pregnancy content every week with a weekly update, and I also put out like mummy content, mummy vlogs, and I've got some new stuff coming up in the autumn and into the winter on my channel, so I'd love to have you, and let's get into my 21-week update. So at 21 weeks, baby is now the size of an aubergine, and in my app it's now classed as like 21 to 23 weeks will be that size. The baby weighs about a pound and on average about a seventh of their birth weight, although if we consider my history of babies, I imagine their birth weight will be a little bit higher than that. I'd be very surprised if I had a 7-pound baby. Pleasantly surprised, mind you, but Grace was £9.6 when she was born, and she was delivered naturally. So it was not the smoothest of deliveries, which you'll know if you've watched my previous updates. But yes, a 7-pounder would be lovely this time. The baby is also undergoing a rapid period of development and growth in their brain, so I need to make sure I'm drinking plenty of water and eating a little bit more healthily than I have been in the last few weeks. And my uterus now, according to my app, is up to my belly button, although what I'll go on to tell you about in terms of like movement and stuff, I've actually felt movement a lot higher than that this week. So hopefully you can notice that I'm looking and feeling a lot better this week in my 21st week of pregnancy than I was in my 20th. So at the start of my 20th week, I got Norovirus from my daughter, who we believe brought it back from nursery. And it was just the worst illness that I've ever had. I've never felt so rough or probably looked so rough. And I filmed my 20-week pregnancy update while I was still recovering, and when I watch it back I think, God, I look really poorly there, and it's probably because I was very poorly. So as I was recovering after that, I think the last update that I gave you guys in that video was that I had my urine tested by my midwife for ketones, and I only had +1 ketones in my urine at that time, and the threshold for hospital treatment was +2, so she just said to keep managing everything at home. However, that day I just didn't feel right. Something felt really off to me. I felt like I needed to go and be checked just for my own reassurance and my own mental well-being. So I spoke to triage again, and they still wouldn't have me into the hospital for monitoring, but they did give me the option to go to the birth centre to see a midwife, have the midwife listen in with a Doppler to the baby and check my blood pressure and check my urine again. So I did exactly that evening. A bit apprehensive about going, but I had such a good experience there. I had a really experienced midwife who qualified in like the 70s, and she was close to retirement, so she's retiring later this year, but she wasn't like an old-fashioned midwife. She was just very empowering in terms of what I was feeling and saying you're absolutely right to come in and be checked, and was so reassuring in that way. But also she spoke to me a bit about my birth choices, which seems to come up in every weekly update, and apologies for that if it's not something that's relevant to you. But if you've not watched my videos before, I experienced birth trauma with my first birth, and I'm electing for a C-section this time. And we had a good chat about my previous birth, and she obviously acknowledged that she didn't have my notes with her, but I told her about my birth from my recollection, and she just gave me some really helpful advice. She said that, you know, it's totally my choice if I want to go forwards and have a C-section, and I should be supported. But she also took me through some of the statistics on the birth centre specifically, and how the birth centre has improved outcomes basically for natural birth. And we spoke a bit about that. Ultimately, for me, it hasn't changed my decision, and coming away from that meeting and with my own mindset on, without like talking to someone else. I think when you're talking to someone else, who's in the medical field, it's very easy to be led by what they're saying. But when I come away and I think about it on my own with all the information that's available to me and I set everything out, I'm still confident that a C-section is the right choice for me. However, I really value the fact that we had such a good conversation about it. And one of the things that came up in that conversation was about induction at my specific hospital, at the trust that I gave birth in for Grace. For first-time mothers who are induced, the rate of like spontaneous vaginal delivery is literally only 30%, which I was just so shocked by. I think that's so incredibly low. And then so following on from that, the rate of C-section, like emergency C-section from a first-time induction was 43%, and the rest were for assisted delivery, like forceps or ventouse. And I just found that completely staggering. Like, if I had known that information before I gave birth the first time, I don't think I would have so willingly consented to my induction. So it's amazing that I've had the information this time. But what I said to the midwife at the time, and she agreed, was that instead of focusing on trying to improve my second birth by pushing me for a natural delivery in a birth centre, which probably is more conducive to a good birth experience, I wish we could focus more on improving those first time statistics so that women didn't end up in the position that I'm in now, where I'm given birth after experiencing trauma. It was just a really good conversation. I didn't feel led one way or the other, but it's just good to talk about birth plans, and I think that will probably be a big topic of conversation with my midwife next time I see her, which is at 24 weeks, because between now and then I've got my consultant appointment on Monday, this Monday coming. So coming out of that appointment at the birth centre, where I had that really good conversation with the midwife, she suggested to me just to write everything down, everything about my options, exactly why I want a C-section, what I think the benefits to me would be, like a documentation of what I see the risks as being, so that nothing comes as a shock to me. And I did exactly that when I came home, and I managed to write like an essay length letter about it, like a 4-page letter, about everything that happened in my first birth, everything that I felt contributed to me having a bad birth experience, how that's impacted me since, about my postnatal recovery, and then I listed out what I thought the benefits to me specifically were of having an elective C-section this time, and I also listed out what I know to be the risks from my own research into elective C-sections. And I just felt so accomplished after doing it. It was such a cathartic exercise. I mean, I cried almost the entire time, because it's like, I don't think the trauma of birth really set in for me until a lot later, probably until I was contemplating giving birth again. But now to think about it in any great detail, it just triggers all of these emotions within me, and I just poured them all out into this letter. And at first I thought, I'm going to take this to my appointment, and if I have the opportunity, I'm going to try and speak a little bit about what I've written in there and give a bit of a statement from my point of view of what I want and why. But then I thought, I want all of these thoughts and feelings to be recorded in my maternity notes in my own words, and I want to be really clear about what I want and why, and I want to ensure basically that that's taken into account when I'm having this conversation with my consultant. So I actually then formatted it as a letter and sent it to my consultant in advance and said, I know we're not meeting until next week and you're probably very busy, but if you do have a chance to read through this letter about my thoughts about my birth this time round, that'd be really helpful to me, and I'd like them to be recorded in my maternity notes. So I'm feeling really good about that like coming up now, because I've got everything out there that I want to. I've asked Steve to come along with me to support me, as in it's actually on the telephone, whereas in non-COVID times obviously it'd be in the hospital, but now it'll be over the telephone. And I've asked if Steve can just be available to sit with me, and I'll say to the consultant as well, I've got my husband here for support. But now that I've got everything out on paper, I'm feeling really positive about that. Not looking forward to it, but I just feel like I'm in a really good place to have that conversation. Obviously, with recovering from norovirus, I definitely feel like I've lost a lot of weight in the last week. And I actually weighed myself for the first time. I never weighed myself in pregnancy with Grace at all. And I tried to make a point of not weighing myself because I don't want it to impact me negatively or make me feel badly about my body, because I can't help that weight gain that's happening. But I felt like I should this week just to see. And according to the scales, I've put on only 1 kilogram since my booking appointment, and I don't think that's right at all. So I can only imagine that, like, I would have had more put on than that if I hadn't had norovirus last week, and I've probably just lost quite a bit of weight. But I don't think it's impacted the growth of the baby or my uterus, because like I say, the app says that my uterus should come up to my belly button now, but actually I felt movement like as far up as here, which is about that much higher than my belly button. So I'm imagining that everything's progressing okay, but we haven't started doing my gap and grow yet, so that'll be really interesting to see. So aside from continuing to get the nursery ready in Grace's room, which I'm really going to focus on in a couple of weeks' time because we're going on holiday next week, so I just want to go on holiday, get that out of the way, get all the washing done, and then start moving her bits over properly. Aside from doing the nursery, I've also started to think about packing my hospital bag, which is obviously very early still. But last time I just found when I went into Primark to get my nighties and my dressing gown and all of the bits that I want to take to hospital, I wasn't able to get a lot of them. So I've just started to collect things as and when I've seen them. And so far I've picked up like a really cozy looking dressing gown that I can take to hospital and a couple of nighties with like a button down at the front. I'm not actually planning to breastfeed this time, but I guess I want the option if I feel that that's like really natural, something that I want to do. But I'm fairly confident I won't breastfeed at all this time, and I'm happy to talk about that in more detail. Maybe I'll cover it in a later pregnancy update. But it's nice to have something that's just like comfy and cozy anyway, with buttons if I need them. So now that I've spoken about my bump, let me just show you what my bump looks like this week. So that's everything for my 21-week pregnancy update. Obviously, I'll be back next week to update you on week 22. That will be after I've had my consultant appointment, which I'm just praying is positive and goes well. It's such a source of anxiety when you're birthing against the grain that you just, I know it's not an approval meeting, but it still just feels like a bit of a hurdle that I need to get past. And once I'm past that, I'll feel hopefully a lot better and a bit more comforted about what's to come. But I've got that coming next week. We're also, like I said, going to be away next week, so probably my next pregnancy update you'll see me perhaps in a different location, unless I manage to film it before we go. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to my channel. If you're pregnant yourself, then congratulations, or even if you just like this type of content, I put out a weekly update of my pregnancy every single week, and I also do like mummy content and just lifestyle content. I've got some new bits coming up. I want to talk about starting your child in nursery, and I want to talk about things that I wish I'd known as a first-time mum as well. So lots of new content coming over the autumn and into the winter. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.